please welcome now our final speaker for this afternoon, Mr. Quentin Thompson, and his thesis, Racial Ruin, the Reality of Regressing Race Relations.
Racism wreaks havoc on America. Its relentless inferno gives rise to chaos and strife. Discrimination divides the nation. Resentment tears the black man apart from the white man. Communities clash in perpetual conflict between races. Today, America seems not one unified nation, but rather many opposing tribes opposed in conflict. How does a nation that declares all men are created equal reach this state? The answer seems obvious. America's heinous history with racism is a secret to none. It has had a consistent tendency towards division and oppression. More than 4 in 10 Americans believe this country has insufficiently distanced itself from these racist manners of its past. And racial groups keep themselves fractured by blaming each other for these evils. Is there a way to halt or even reverse this regressive cycle of resentment? Or is America doomed to the everlasting turmoil of civil war? To reach a solution, we must determine what fuels this indignant flame of division and find a way to extinguish it. Half of black adults in America believe that establishing racial equality for all is highly unlikely. Despite this, I argue that racial tensions should be far less severe than they currently are. For many highly followed organizations, like Black Lives Matter, prosper off of social division. They magnify existing outrage by promoting harmful ideas that attack specific races. This schism is intensified by these groups improperly determining justice based on race. One's innocence, one's guilt, ultimately decided by the color of one's skin. These groups actively promote schismatic mindsets that incite further conflict between races, making a resolution impossible. Half of black adults in America believe that establishing racial equality for all is highly unlikely. America's diversity shows how humanity can be united through its differences. But this unifying aspect has been corrupted into a vice that tears us apart. Racial identity today is emphasized to separate races, to deem which must be seen as victims and which must be viewed as oppressors. BLM leaders assert that white identity is innately oppressive. Yusra Kogali, founder of BLM Toronto, asserts that white people need white supremacy to protect their survival as a people. Their followers are compelled to view each white man as an oppressor, guilty of each unjust act of all whites of the past. This guilt, white guilt, deems an entire race of people guilty for crimes they did not commit. According to Shelby Steele, African-American author and race relations specialist, white guilt is the terror of being seen as a racist, a terror that has caused whites to act guilty towards minorities even when they feel no actual guilt. Minorities hold true to their racial identity to emphasize their innocence, whilst whites carry an unavoidable burden of guilt and punishment. Treating people based on a forced racial identity prevents racial harmony. Regardless, these same people pursue justice through social division. They would argue that an entire race contains oppressors who must be brought to justice for the sake of those they inhibit. This form of racial justice asserts that those with an oppressive identity must repay those with a black identity. Dr. Rashawn Ray and Andre M. Perry, professional researchers of sociology and race, assert that reparations for Black Americans is part of the healing and reconciliation process. It is seen as an opportunity for whites to abandon their oppressive nature and repay the debts they owe as a race. Each individual is viewed based on generalized perceptions of their race, automatically assumed as contributors to discrimination. For they are not judged by the content of their character, but by the color of their skin. To assume that every white person owes reparations over 150 years after the abolition of slavery is unwise and unjust. Conservative writer David Horowitz explains that only a small fraction of white people were ever slaveholders. So why must the descendants of families who never owned slaves atone for these crimes? Furthermore, many white people gave their lives fighting against slavery in the Civil War. Why must their descendants incur a debt to African Americans as if this sacrifice was not enough? Entire groups of people are deemed guilty. The entire white race is viewed as if they share the blood of evil oppressors. As vast groups of people are considered guilty until proven innocent, race relations boil with bitterness, heated by hatred. When racial identity becomes our identity, our differences become insurmountable. Following these false doctrines of evil people has plunged humanity into discord and darkness. We have lost sight of He who dispels these divisions to create unity. Galatians 3:28 proclaims, "There is neither Jew nor Greek, there is neither slave nor free, there is no male and female, for you are all one in Christ Jesus." The differences that separate us are made insignificant through Christ's sacrifice. We live in a world where the effects of the fall will permanently persist. There is no escape from discrimination. There is no cure to racism. But we must not let that define who we are. We must not succumb to these vices, allowing them to tear us apart. We must not lose sight of He who unites us all. We are all made in the image of God. We all share the burden of sin, our true guilt. But we share forgiveness. We share salvation. We share the perfect example who does not concern himself with our color, who disregards our differences, who sees our shared similarity. By exemplifying Christ, who brings each person closer to one another, we embrace our likeness. We embrace our humanity, together as one. Thank you.